today in round 8 of the candidates tournament. The two Americans played each other. Well, neither are having the best of tournaments so far. Both really needed to win today. Nakamura's already lost 2 games. Caruana has had 7 draws. Well, okay, no defeats, but no wins either. So both really need to win, and of course they're huge rivals. So this was a really tasty encounter. So Caruana with the white pieces. It was a Berlin, my favourite opening, and Caruana didn't go for the endgame, but kept more tension with d3, that's what's been happening in this tournament. No one's going for the ending anymore. At least that's the current fashion. And the players followed a line that Caruana has already played in Vaikonzai just a couple of months ago, where he had a very tense game against Sergei Karyakin. Probably should have won it. And Wei Yi also, with white, won a beautiful game against David Navarra. You can find those games on my YouTube channel if you're interested. So this is the position where Caruana played h4 against Karyakin, setting in train his kingside pawn storm before committing his king, and that's what Wei Yi did as well. But today Caruana castled queenside straight away, so it's a little bit different. And, well, when you have kings on opposite sides, this already leads to a very, very sharp position, and Nakamura wasted no time in throwing his pawns down the board towards white's king, and this knight floated over to this lovely square, the outpost on f5, but there's no real danger at the moment. And a4, this already looks pretty scary for white's king. Not many pieces around the king, but these pawns, well, in particular being a pawn, storming down the board. Of course, it's crucial for both sides to try and open a file against the enemy king to get those heavy pieces attacking. And now a fascinating move from Caruana. Bishop g5. Well, what on earth is that about? Attacking the queen. Of course, you knock back the bishop with f6. That's practically forced. And here, amazingly, Nakamura said that he had analysed bishop d2, the bishop coming right back from where it started. But instead, Caruana played bishop e3. Let me show you, after the game, what Nakamura said he'd analysed in his preparation. This shows how deeply these players at this level are analysing. He said he'd analysed this. So the bishop comes out, and now black goes for a battery, a very crude battery, against white's king. Well, as there are no minor pieces to help protection, you really need a knight defending on c1. This is, well, unbelievably dangerous. For example, after b3, you can simply crash in with a very obvious sacrifice, and black is winning. So that's what Nakamura said afterwards that was his prep. But instead, Caruana played the bishop to e3, not d2, and you'll see in a moment what a difference this makes. So knight c5 looks pretty normal, and g4, so Caruana getting his attack going. So bishop e6. We've seen all this in this previous variation, but with the bishop on e3 this time, not on d2. Now what happens if Nakamura goes for this very crude idea of playing the bishop back and queen e6? So this already looks rather nasty. But in this case, incredibly, b3 actually saves white. Because in this case, you can see the queen defends laterally across the second rank. So in this case, actually, incredibly, black isn't breaking through as quickly as he would like. So here, in fact, it's white's counterattack that is coming through. In this position, well, you can take here, and white is actually winning this position, and it's all because the queen defends crossing. Of course, it's very complicated still, but trust me, the computers say this is winning for white, and that's what Nakamura had analysed during the game, and clearly that's what Caruana had analysed in his pre-game preparation. So instead, Nakamura changed his tune. He played in a different way. He played b4, which also looks incredibly dangerous to open a file. But Caruana didn't back down. He threw the g-pawn forward with g5. Nakamura played b3. Of course, if you play a3, then the position gets closed with that one. So b3. It looks really, really dangerous. Now, you know, if you had to bet at this stage, you might well bet on black in this position. Of course, if you open a file, it is catastrophic. It's going to be mate before you know it. But Caruana, incredibly cool, just played rook g1. Caruana playing steadily at this moment. Nakamura was the one consuming such a lot of time here. So black took on a2 and the king just nudged into the corner. Caruana is using quite a familiar defensive technique here. Basically, these two pawns block out black's attack, and in this way white manages to keep the position relatively closed on the queen side. Still looks, optically at any rate, terrifying, because white doesn't have many pieces around protecting the king. But actually there's no clear way through for black here. And once again, Nakamura was using so much time here. He exchanged off that dangerous knight, because now actually white all of a sudden is starting to build up some pretty serious threats against black's king. So Hikaru exchanged on f5. Played a3, of course. White has to keep the position closed with b3. Still no way through for black. And here, I think somehow, I think it's a very difficult position for black, because it's not easy to see how he breaks through on the queen side. But I think what Nakamura played was somehow a bit too crude. He played knight a6, so what he'd like to do is perhaps throw in the knight here, maybe bring the bishop in and come into c3. But Caruana played, I think, a very simple move here. Perhaps there's more than one good move, but c3 is a really simple idea. It looks a bit odd because you leave that pawn maybe slightly weakened, but in fact white can always just take that pawn on a2 to defend b3, and the queen defends laterally as well. Queen takes a2 sometimes comes into consideration, and the pawn on c3 just plugs those dart squares, and in fact black has no way through here. Now it's white's turn on the king side, and basically Nakamura couldn't come up with a decent defence. He dropped the bishop back. I think that's already an indication that things have gone badly wrong. Lots of ways for white to proceed here. Maybe rook g4 is an idea, but what Caruana played was very subtle. Knight d2. In fact, we saw this manoeuvre in his game against Karyakin from Vaikonze. He spun this knight round and it sat on e4, and Caruana was very unlucky not to win the game. He had a huge positional advantage. But I love this manoeuvre, because once that knight reaches e4, it's such a powerful piece. Well, Nakamura took on g5. It's very difficult to find a defence now. He played knight c5. Looks tricky, threat here, but what a response from Caruana. He must have seen this from some way off. Beautiful move. So getting the rook out of any danger, and it means that if black exchanges on d3, then white actually wins material with this little discovered attack. So the knight threatens a discovered check, not a discovered check, just a check, a fork on f6, but also rook takes, and white is winning material in this position. So back to this position after rook g3, excellent move. e4 from Nakamura. This is desperation, real desperation. Basically, white is just, if black does nothing, white is going to take, plonk the knight on e4, what a beautiful blockading piece, and switch the rooks to the g file. I mean, that's what happened anyway, but Nakamura is hoping just to kind of open lines and create confusion. But actually, Caruana wrapped this game up very impressively, very smoothly. That knight is absolutely stable in the centre of the board, protected by the d3 pawn. And now he just brought his heavy pieces to the kingside. I mean, apart from anything else, white, what's the score in pawns? Well, it's actually level, but of course this is dropping. Black's structure is a complete mess. And the rooks switch across. Rook b8 threatens the pawn, but no bother. King takes a2. Everything under control. And of course, black would very much like to play queen d5 to bring the queen in, but I'm afraid that knight proves rather too strong. Knight check. It's pinned, of course. And now Nakamura had something like a minute left for all his moves to reach the time control at move 40. Bishop h4. It's a useless move, but honestly, by this point, there is really no defence, and white can do practically anything here. One quite attractive idea is queen g4. This is very forcing. The bishop comes back to f6. You take on h7. Of course, that has to be taken because there's a threat to take on g7, and now this forces a winning rook and pawn endgame. Perhaps that's you might think that's a bit meagre, but this is so easy to win. Black can resign in this position. I mean, white is how many pawns up? 3 pawns up, and these two are going. But so that's one particular way. But there are many other ways as well. f6 is a great move. After this is taken, queen h5. No real defence to queen h7, and if rook takes knight, you take here, and zhup, you cut back and take the rook. Caruana thought for about 10 minutes here he had loads of time, and played rook g4. He basically remained very cool in spite of Nakamura's time shortage. Best way to do it, just calculate everything out. So this is a very sensible move, very calm, hitting the bishop. If the bishop retreats, then, well, there are many ways to win, but this is quite nice. Check. Move the queen in. Well, white has queen, 2 rooks and a knight attacking. I don't think black is going to survive that position. Instead, Nakamura played queen d5, threatening a checkmate, but after c4, that was the end of the game. Nakamura resigned. If queen takes pawn, then you just take a bishop. And that's that. White's piece up and an attack. Game over. What a convincing victory by Fabiano Caruana. And suddenly, with one win in the first 8 rounds, with 1 win and 7 draws, Caruana is in contention. All the other games were drawn. Actually, it was a very, very hotly contested round, but all the other games were drawn. Karyakin survived by the skin of his teeth against Fiddler. Karyakin and Aronian lead with 5. Anand and Caruana have 4.5. Giri has 4, and so on. It is absolutely wide open with 6 rounds to go.